The butterfly guard is a really powerful and versatile open guard that works in all formats of grappling, gi, no gi, if strikes are involved, if they're not involved. It's really useful and it works at all levels. One of the things that makes the butterfly guard effective is it allows me to move and transition to other guards, either because I choose to, because I want to attack from other guards, or when the butterfly guard gets disrupted, it allows me to make other transitions. What we're going to go over in this video is 2 ways to use the butterfly guard to get to the single leg X guard and then the traditional X guard. This is a game that Marcelo Garcia made famous to great success. A lot of the modern leg attackers do it because, as the man Dave Porter says, single leg X is the gateway drug to leg locks. But let's not worry about that right now. Let's just worry how we get from our traditional butterfly hook guard into the single leg X guard. And what we're going to do is we're going to scoot underneath them, especially if they give us space. We're going to get to that single leg X position. I'm going to show you 2 ways to do it. First way, if my partner's standing in front of me, right? So if Jesse chooses to stand, you see the space here between Jesse's 2 legs? There's plenty of opportunity for me to scoot in there. If he's not giving me space, that's what we'll do next. So what I'm going to do, if I know that I want to get underneath him, yes, I'm going to scoot, but I'm also going to grip. So my rear hand is going to post so I can butt scoot, and I'm also going to grab their heel. My spine stays curved during this, you'll see why in a second, because now as I scoot under, I can shoot up, right? And so the most important thing here is to get your hips high, because you can see Jesse's knee is controlled by my pinch here, and if he tries to move around a little bit, even though I don't have a grip, I'm going to stay stuck to him. If I'm here, Jesse tries to move around, and now I don't even have guard anymore. So again, if they're standing, maybe they're trying to movement pass and there's this space available, we're going to move our hips underneath them and get ready to shoot our hips up. To help us get in, we can post behind us and grab their heel. And I want you to watch 2 things. I want you to watch me move forward and then uncoil my body as I shoot my hips up. When I do that, this heel is going for the hip with my toes pointed out. Some guys will also put their feet on the gi here, that's fine. Either way, the most important thing to do is to think about pinching your knees together. You'll never get them totally together because there's a human leg in the way. But if I'm loosey-goosey, Jesse can move. And now, I don't really have a guard. If my hips are high and my legs are pinched, that's where my attacks can start to come into play. One other thing, if we can rotate just a little bit and face this way, a lot of times a good opponent, and of course, we're here in what we call the single leg X guard, what some people call Ashigurami. We can do a lot of attacks from here. And there are videos on that attack, that series as well. A smart opponent is usually going to try to disrupt this knee pinch, which means he's going to push the foot off. That's when we can go to our traditional X guard, with my top leg hooking his far hip and my bottom leg hooking behind his knee pin. And of course, there are attacks from here as well. That's the transition sequence that many open guard players are good at, and I urge you to spend the time to get good at as well. Let's see that from the top all the way through. Most important details, I need to scoot under and shoot my hips up. So I'm going to grab his leg, post my hand, hips come up, heel pinches his hip, my knees pinch tight together. What I'm doing with this hand, usually, I'm going to be gripping like I have an ankle lock grip. There are other sweeps where we can dive under, but we'll get into that later. For now, just kind of hug his ankle to you. As he pushes the foot off the hip, my legs change position. Let's rotate this way so they can see. One more time. This leg comes to the far hip. I want my knee behind him, my knee's kind of like splayed out. So now if Jesse tries to move a little bit, he's very, very off balance. I can push him, I can pull him. A lot of fun stuff that I can do here. So that is a high percentage entry if your opponent chooses to stand. But what if your opponent does what Jesse's doing right now, on his knees? There's no way that I can scoot under him. There's no space there, and he's not standing. And so if they don't have at least their leg up in combat base, it's really not possible to get to the single leg X. If Jesse does go up in combat base just for a second, we can still do essentially the same movement. I'll show another way to get into there later. But for the last part of this video, I want to show you what to do if your buddy keeps their knees on the back. Because we basically have to make them stand and give us space. So I'm going to observe butterfly guard fundamentals, which is my head's going to be lower than his head, my chest is going to be in front of my hips so I don't get flattened out, and I'm going to get double underhooks. When I do that, it's going to enable me to lift Jesse. So my head's under his head, and I have underhooks. I can make him go straight up. So what I'm going to do here, so I'm going to get double underhooks, clasp my hands behind him, lift with my hooks and rock backward. And as he does that, he has to post or face plant. He makes the right choice, creating space for me to get to the single leg X. Let's do that one more time from this angle. And the reason this is good butterfly guard fundamentals anyway is if my head is lower than his head and my chest is in front of my hips and Jesse tries to flatten me out, very difficult. If Jesse gets his head lower than my head and he gets the underhooks, now if he tries to flatten me, it's super easy, and I no longer really have an effective guard. So I always want my head lower than his head. I want the underhooks. So I'm going to cup here, posting on the mat, right to the single leg X. And many of you are probably thinking, can't you initiate leg attacks from that position? You absolutely can. The beautiful thing about transitions, though, is that we always want to stay one step ahead of our opponents. So learning those transitions and not only learning them, but drilling them, will make you a step ahead of your opponents. So whether you choose to sweep, whether you choose to go for leg locks, whether you choose to stand up, you're always going to have an advantage if you learn the transitions better than your opponent.